Today, I wanted to tackle a question that I've never heard asked before. It's this question of what does it feel like to starve to death? It sounds horrible at first glance, and it is horrible, but billions of people have experienced this. About a billion people are experiencing it right now, at least according to a 2016 study. So, why is it so unacceptable to ask this question? I want to become empathetic. We try to consider all people's perspectives and understand what it's like to be in someone's shoes in all scenarios. So, why is it so reprehensible to consider such a question? I asked ChatGPT this question of what does it feel like to starve to death? Obviously, an AI system doesn't know, but maybe I thought it might have some interesting answers. Let's see what it said. So interestingly, ChatGPT refused to give me an answer. I said, what does starving to death feel like? You guys can read the response. I'm really sorry to hear that you're feeling this way, but I can't provide you with help. Whatever. It's just a question. I'm trying to clarify. I don't know anyone struggling with that. It's just their answers are extremely hesitant to give me an answer, and I could not make it give me an answer, which I thought was so interesting. How is this inappropriate? So my question to Chad is, how is the question of what does it feel like to starve to death inappropriate for purely research, educational, empathetic purposes? I'm not starving to death. I don't know anyone that is, but I want to know, what it's like. I don't understand what's wrong with that question. Providing a detailed timeline of the stages of starvation can be considered inappropriate for a few reasons. First and foremost, discussing such topics in a detailed manner may be distressing for some individuals, especially those who may have personal or sensitive experiences relating to starvation or eating disorders. Okay, but wouldn't we rather understand where those people are, hypothetically, that we know some of these people? So this is all to say that this is a question that I've never thought of before, but I wanted to do some research on. And I found a really interesting article from NPR from 2016, and I thought I would share that. Let's share our screen and go to this article. So we can see here that, starvation often occurs in places that are, malnourished. So there's different types of starvation, I've thought of. There's chronic malnourishment that I think eventually leads to starvation, but also this idea of fasting. Like if you're a perfectly well-fed person, like if you were me right now, I just had a big burrito, and then I stopped eating. Like at what point of the fast, of the, starve, would I start feeling the effects? Obviously, I don't know, if I haven't came across any article, any report that says anything about that. There's really no answer on how long you can go without food. It's roughly around a month. That's what people are saying. You'll see in this article that women are, supposedly have a larger percentage of their body stored in fat. So they hypothetically would be able to do longer periods of fasting, but they say there's no studies around that. And that's kind of just a theoretical. But I honestly think this is a question of increasing our empathy. What are these people going through in, this, South Asian, Indian, African, I mean, Central American? Largely, I don't think people are starving to death in, the Western, quote unquote, Western world or developed countries. But I mean, it says here in this article, like we can look right here, that this is in 2017, about 1 in 9, or about 800 million people in the world suffer from undernourishment. And that's how starvation begins. It begins with undernourishment. People do not get in enough calories to keep the body's energy needs, afloat. I thought this was a really important question. This is according to the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization. So I'm just kind of confused why this is such a horrible question to ask, and why it is not being, why? Genuinely, why is this such a horrible question to ask? I understand that it could, affect people with eating disorders, but that's not really the question of eating disorders. I'm asking what are what are the biological effects of starvation? Like my real question is, what kills you in starvation? Is it that, like, I've actually learned a lot reading these articles. The answer is basically like you have different parts of your body that get used up in when you fast. So at first, let's see if we can find that part right now. Basically, it's children are small and have fewer body fat stores to draw from. No, that's not it. Basically, it's this idea that carbohydrates and fats are the sources of energy that are used first in a state of, starvation, and then it's the muscle sources. So that's why you see, like, complete muscle deterioration in people that are starving to death. Starvation is a state of threat. And so people who are starving might act like a cornered animal. That is, so interesting. That's this idea of hangry, but on steroids. Like that is the most just such an interesting, thing to think about. I just thought this was such an interesting question because I've never been asked it. I think it's important to consider a question that you've never been asked before, right? And I really just wanted to know what was so wrong with that. But let's just go through a little bit of this article because I thought it was so interesting. Let's dive into some of the biological effects of this. And this article does a really good job. So let's go. Over weeks and months, malnutrition can result in specific diseases like anemia. And when people don't get enough iron or bare fiber, they don't get adequate thiamine, which I'm guessing is, some type of molecule that your body needs to survive. A severe lack of food for a prolonged period of time, not enough calories of any sort to keep up with the body's energy needs is starvation. The body's reserve resources are depleted. The result is substantial weight loss, blah, 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 blah. Eventually death. Jesus. Okay. When faced with starvation, the body fights back. The first day without food is a lot like the overnight fast between dinner one night and breakfast the next morning. Energy levels are low, but pick up with a morning meal. Within days, faced with nothing to eat, the body begins feeding on itself. The body starts to consume energy stores, carbohydrates, fats, and then the protein part of tissue, says Maureen Gallagher, a senior nutrition advisor to Action Against Hunger. Metabolism slows and the body cannot regulate its temperature. Kidney function is impaired and the immune system weakens. When the body uses its reserves to provide basic energy needs, it can no longer supply necessary nutrients to vital organs and tissues. The heart, the lungs, ovaries, and testes shrink. Whew, that's a bad one. Muscles shrink and people feel weak. Body temperature drops and people can become chilled. People will become irritable and eventually becomes difficult to concentrate. Okay. Eventually, nothing is left for the body to scavenge except muscle. Once protein stores start getting used, death is not far, says Dr. Nancy Zucker, director of the Duke Center for Eating Disorders at Duke University. You're consuming your own muscle, including the heart muscle. So that's, I think, this idea of, well, let's just read this. In the later stages of starvation, people can experience hallucinations, convulsions, and disruptions in heart rhythm. And finally, the heart stops. So it's the heart that goes first or the different diseases we've encountered before. That's why, I mean, obviously, like it doesn't seem reasonable for there to be an exact answer to this question because this study would be, completely unethical. I mean, it would literally be murder, but I'm just really was fascinated by the question that there wasn't more information out there. I was honestly surprised by that. It talks about Gandhi and it talks about a study found that hunger strikes in various parts of the world survive for up to 40 days. Okay, but there's no specific number. This is the part about women being able to survive for longer, and a study that was done where people only ate 1,570 calories, which is below the daily average. But my question was not so much under nutrition, which I guess is a more important question if we're really trying to be empathetic. I guess my question was a little bit more aimed at just understanding purposes. What would happen to my body if I just stopped eating? Like what part of me would shut down first? Would it be like my organs? Would it be my heart? According to this, it says if your muscle cells deteriorate enough, then your heart is going to basically start to become eaten, I guess, by your own body, which is so crazy. It talks about children here. But what is going on during starvation internally? This is my question. Both adults and children can act very out of character. No, that's not what we want. The body attempts to protect the brain, says Zucker, by shutting down the most metabolically intense functions first, like digestion, resulting in diarrhea. I've heard a lot of diarrhea happening in sub-Saharan Africa, and I've always wondered why. I think it's partially due to diseases, but it might also be because of undernutrition. Those energy stores being diverted to less energy intensive processes and basically diverted away from digestions. That's what it's saying. The brain is relatively protected, but eventually we worry about neuronal death and brain matter loss, she says. Just as the heart, lungs, and other organs weaken and shrivel without food, eventually so does the brain. The concern for children is that their brains are still developing and any loss of function due to starvation could be permanent. Wow, very interesting. It's hard to know. Children suffer more steeply, but their recovery might still be better. It's a tie. Very interesting. People who are in the throes of starvation look apathetic and lethargic, almost mechanical in their slow motion reactions. Starving people may not look as if they're in acute pain, but that doesn't mean they're not suffering. I've seen kids who are not kids anymore. They're either irritated and crying or they're apathetic and not playing, says Gallagher, and their mothers are hopeless and not showing any signs of caring. Treatment for someone, and then it goes into treatment. But this doesn't exactly answer the question I'm trying to get at, and I don't know if it's even possible to answer this question. My question is, someone that is completely healthy, how long can they fast for, right? We know that you can do about a week. That's totally fine. It seems like as long as you're getting your salt intake right and you're not like fainting or anything crazy. But like what shuts down first? Is it the heart? It seems like that's kind of the closest answer this article gave. I don't know why this question was so controversial. Well, I do understand why this question was so controversial. This is life and it's literally life and death. But I don't see how it's inappropriate to ask this. I don't see how someone suffering from like an eating disorder would find offense to this question. I mean, I don't even want to get into that, but people with an eating disorder, at least their family, would want to know, to what degree it's like the most danger. What there's no going back with. Obviously, all eating disorders are horrible, and that people feel like have to do that for whatever reasons they have is horrible. But I think it's a separate question from what I'm asking. I'm asking biologically what happens to the body when there's just no food, when there's no energy. And it seems like there's a cannibalization process that occurs. And eventually we get to processes shutting down and, basically divestment of energy from key parts of your body, leading to sicknesses and disease. Maybe the immune system gets less energy and maybe goes to like the heart or something. Or there could be a cannibalization process of muscle cells where you become so deteriorated, either your brain or your heart stops functioning. But like, and then there's this philosophical question I wanted to ask, but I was told it was inappropriate. It's like, what I mean, obviously the pain is probably excruciating of being malnourished and being like just, I mean, hungry is obviously not the right word for it, but starving. Like, what does it feel like if your brain and your heart become cannibalized? What is that possibly like? Like, if you die from starvation, what is the process of death feel like? If you take a bullet to the head, this is horrible, guys. Like, I understand that this is horrible, but if you let me get out of here. I want to look you guys in the eyes. If you're starving to death, what does it feel like? Like, dying is such an interest, like it's such a horrible and interesting thing to think about. I mean, philosophy has considered death for, as long as we've been thinking and philosophizing. But it's like a bullet to the head or getting your head chopped off. There's different questions of how long can, your brain function without the body. And, in chickens, it's different or whatever. There's a nervous system that keeps firing. But if it's this slow death without food or without water, for instance, that's just something I've never considered. And I mean, how horrible this is. I feel like, if anything, I mean, I hope no one's taking offense to this. That's not how I mean it at all. I want to become more empathetic, and I genuinely just want to understand what kind of processes, if there's any like mechanisms that the body has, and it seems like of diverting energy to different sources and trying to live as long as possible. And it's basically a fight to the death without food. It's just a very interesting question that I never heard anyone ask and that I've never considered before. So, I hope no one gets offended by this, but I mean, yeah, it's been interesting to think about. And, I hope everyone, gets enough food, but there are people out there starving to death. So I don't think it's a bad thing to think about, genuinely. Let me know what you guys think. And if you're fasting, just be careful. Make sure you're getting salt and water. And this is all with water. You can go, a month without eating, but with water. Hydration kills you way earlier. Well, thanks for listening. This has been a bit of a ramble. I don't know if anyone is going to watch this one, but yeah, thanks for listening.